G'day, it's Milton Kane. Today I want to discuss the situation about retirement income. As we know, the age pension which we had many years ago, we may not be aware it started in 1909. That particular pension was a set rate of money coming out of everybody's pay, and then people got the same amount of money for the pension. However, Paul Keating introduced the compulsory superannuation. Compulsory superannuation is in fact what employers pay as a contribution to a super fund, and it's a percentage. It currently is around about 9.5% of a person's wage. Now, I've done some figures here to help us look through things. Currently the pension, if you are on the full pension, without the add-ons, but just the full basic pension, a person would be getting $22,360 a year. And that's an important figure to remember. Now, if a person's earning $40,000 a year, we would assume that starting work at 20 and going through until 60, even though the retirement age by now will be going up to 70, I'm just going to assume 40 years. It makes it easier that way. So $40,000 over 40 years, the person would be contributing annually, or the employer would be contributing annually, $3,800 to their superannuation fund. And that's equivalent to, over that 40-year period, $152,000. Now, assuming that there was no increase in that money, assuming that it stayed at the same level, that would be equivalent to 6.8 years of retirement at the $22,360 pension rate. The reason why I'm making this assumption, and I'll make this assumption across all areas, is because the decisions about investment are very much variable. Also, the success or otherwise of those decisions about investment are also very variable. As we know, we are suffering a corona crisis at the moment, financial crisis there. We've gone through previous financial crises as well. During those times, earnings on super funds were reduced significantly. Of course, that's always an important point. Back to the numbers. At $60,000 annual salary, $5,700 is paid by the employer into your super fund, giving a total over 40 years of $228,000. That would be giving you, at the rate of $22,360 a year, 10.2 years of retirement. Now, on $100,000 annual income, your employer would put in $9,500 into your super fund. Over a 40-year period, that would equate to $380,000. That would give you 16.99 years in retirement at the $22,360 mark. At $500,000, the annual $500,000 annual income, $47,500 would be put into your superannuation fund. That would mean over 40 years, $1,900,000 would go into your super fund, giving you 85 years of funded retirement at $22,360 per annum expenditure on the basic pension. At $1 million, an employer would put into that superannuation fund $95,000 per year, giving $3,800,000 in the super fund. And that would provide a person on $22,360 pension amount $160 9.95 years of income. Now you can see how this particular fund, this superannuation scheme, is one that actually helps the wealthy, and it does not help the poor. Those people who have worked hard and have worked most of their life on $40,000 a year for 40 years can expect to have 6.8 years retirement, plus any earnings on that particular income over the period of time. Now, those people who are on $40,000 a year, generally speaking, are not people capable of making huge financial increase decisions. They are usually people who will go for more standard and basic policies in regard to that. And they will not slip their money into the better super funds. They can't afford the risk. A small problem, you will see that 6.8 years not expand or even possibly even contract. Of course, those on $500,000 a year, they can afford to go and invest into speculative areas where they may make some huge increases, or actually may fall off and actually whittle away some of the money, because they've got 85 years. And when you retire at 60, having an 85-year expansion beyond that is quite considerable. Would not be expected. There are not many people living to be 145 years of age. On the other hand, those people on $1 million, $1 million annual salary, they can afford lots of risks. They can be on the really right out there, don't mind me stuff, because any bad decision that they make, it doesn't make any difference, because they've still got, even if they just get a couple of years of their salary, they've still got some decent retirement pension. And so they've got virtually 170 years after retiring at 60, which means that they would be living, if they were to expend all of that, they have the capacity of being able to live to 330 years of age, which is just not on these days. 230 years of age, which is just not on these days. So we actually have an interesting scenario. This pension fund, this pension plan, was drawn up by senior public servants. And generally speaking, those senior public servants are not on the $40,000 a year mark. They're not on the $60,000 a year mark. They're not on $100,000 a year mark. They are very close to, if not on, $500,000 and more. Those ones that were signed off and drew up are on it. Paul Keating at the time was on virtually $500,000 a year. It is interesting to note that Paul Keating made a decision. He made a press statement. It was about between 18 months and 2 years ago, not quite 2 years ago, he made a statement telling the government that because people were living longer than the actuaries had come up with, what they had thought they would need to be funding for their retirement, there needed to be an insurance plan to cover that. Well, if we were to put all of this stuff together, we have a look at all these years that are there. We've got this 169 years. Now, in reality, there are not that many people that live beyond 100. So that means that if we were to take from this 170 years, which is virtually 170 years, if we were to take from that the 40 years to taking it up to 100, we still have 130 years, which would be sitting there that could be split amongst others. The old pension plan was the plan that worked and worked well. It was a good plan. We need to have a very good, long, hard look at what we do with retirement income. Of course, at the moment, those people who are in Struggle Street because of this particular virus, The Prime Minister said you can take up to $10,000 per year out of your fund. So that means if you took $10,000 per year out of your fund for the next 2 years, these numbers would be down lower. With all of the corruptions that we've noticed from the financial institution inquiry that we had recently, the superannuation schemes were not devoid of being in the muck of that. So when we put it all together, what we've come up with is we've trusted these financial institutions to do something which is going to benefit the most wealthy. By the way, a person on $100,000 a year, they can possibly start thinking about investing in a second property. Not many people on $40,000 a year could think about investing in investment property. They might be lucky to purchase their own property. 60,000ers, they may start to try to do something there, but they need to be careful because they may not get paid enough before they have to retire. But of course, the 500 and the $1 million a year, well, they can actually buy all amounts of investment properties and actually have other incomes coming in as well. And so that makes them, I guess, very, very well off in their retirement years. The question we have to ask ourselves, and this is the important thing we have to ask ourselves, should the government set up a scheme similar to what we had so that we have all people having security in retirement? Or should we stick with a scheme that those people who are fortunate enough to get the very high paying jobs, they can live like kings in the whole of their retirement? One of the things I want you to understand is that I have not assumed anybody taking breaks. Now, the most vulnerable people in this are, of course, the people who actually don't get a job or don't have long-term employment. They are very vulnerable. One group of people who may well have long-term employment but have it interrupted are women, particularly women who have babies, because they will need to take time out for the sake of their children, for the sake of their family, from time to time. Well, even if it only be just enough time to be able to have the baby and then return to work, there will be times that they will need to take out. So you see, the problem is the people who have strings of unemployment, and could be related to an injury, it could be an injury at work, or it could be an injury in some other circumstances. Those people, they are going to be very vulnerable for not having a good retirement income. The other people, obviously, are those people who, for whatever reason, their industry closes down. And we've seen a shift of that in this country for a long time. We've been watching it. We've been watching people involved in manufacturing who have suddenly lost their job. BHP, Newcastle, 6,000 jobs gone, just like that. The car industry, thousands of jobs gone. You know, we've seen this all of the time. And every time these jobs go, there is an implication. Each one of those persons, there is no longer any superannuation contribution going into their fund. And to make matters worse, there are many times an employer may not put the money into the fund. And if you approach the tax office, or when you discover that it's not happened, and you go and talk to them, you talk to other people about it, they will tell you, well, you'll have to take action against the employer. But if they have chosen to go bankrupt for whatever reason and not pay the money, the chances of you getting it are quite low. So even then, you can be very vulnerable. But obviously the people in the higher end are more capable. If we must stick with this system, there needs to be some changes. Because at the end of the day, I don't expect a person to fall off the perch, in other words, die, in under 10 years after their employment ceases. I don't think it's reasonable to expect that. The words of Paul Keating in the press statement he made between 18 months and 2 years ago, was he said people are living longer than the actuaries had expected them to live. Well, come on. Our life is not about just working and then dying. Surely our life needs to be about aspects of enjoyment as well. We need to have opportunity to be able to do more than just work and work and work for the sake of those people who earn big dollars on the fact of the work that we do. I'd like you to apply your mind to it and think about what is fair. At the Christian Democratic Party, one of the big things and one of the big tests of life is simple. We need to care for the needy. It does say in the Bible that we're to care for widows and orphans. But we've expanded that within our party to care for the vulnerable. Which means that we want people to be able to have a reasonable retirement. Anybody out of work is vulnerable to not being financially independent. And we need to make sure that we can supply the resources so they can do that. I'd like your feedback. I'd like your information. What are your thoughts about it? I know there is a way that we can't really trust the government to handle our funds. They've proved it in the past. They spent our pension funds in the past for various reasons. From Gough Whitlam through to Bob Hawke. Those funds were being spent on various things. Maybe those programs were important, but were they more important than your retirement? Just the same as today that people are being encouraged to spend some aspects of their retirement. Of course, those people who are fortunate enough to buy a home, we have government officials telling them that they should have what's called a reverse mortgage. They should get into reverse mortgage plans. All that means is that you own a house, and instead of you having a mortgage to pay it off, a reverse mortgage is you have a line of credit drawing down the value of your home, so the bank owns more and more of your home week after week as you pay the bills you need to pay to live. It is a backdoor, if you don't mind me saying so, a backdoor death tax, in my opinion, because you've got nothing left to pass on. Because it'll get to a level where the bank will simply say, this asset, we need to flog it off, we need to sell it, its debts are too high. Sorry, you've got no home to give to anyone when you retire. Thank you.